Welcome, everyone, to the closing session of the U.S.-Japan Council's virtual 2020 Public Symposium. My name is Colbert Matsumoto, and I'm the chairman of Island Holdings, Inc. in Hawaii, and a founding board member of the U.S.-Japan Council, now serving on its Legacy Council. First, to cover some logistics for this session, Japanese interpretation is available by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. We hope you had a chance to enjoy the many sessions over the past 3 days, which have covered a range of topics focused on the community building, diversity, and resilience in the United States and Japan. Each of these areas is tied to US-Japan Council's mission to connect diverse leaders from the United States and Japan, from across backgrounds, sectors, and generations, and to create a space for dialogue and partnership to take action in fostering a stronger US-Japan relationship and a better future for the Asia-Pacific region. In the opening session 2 days ago, we got to hear from US-Japan Council's founding board chair, Tom Ino. Tom, along with the late Senator Dan Inoue and Irene Hirano Inoue, who served as USJC's founding president until her passing this past April, along with several other Japanese American community leaders, came together with a vision to develop a diverse network of key stakeholders from the community who would support and advance the bilateral relationship between our two great countries. They brought with them decades of leadership experience, serving others and bringing bonds of friendship between people. They laid the groundwork for this organization, the US-Japan Council, which today has some of the most passionate and dedicated leaders within its membership ranks. Through the support of our corporate and individual donors and network of partner organizations and friends, we have advanced several key initiatives in both countries around such areas as women's leadership and philanthropy. We developed active networks of government, business, and nonprofit leaders in both countries by bringing dozens of delegations of community leaders to each other's country. And we were on the front line in responding to crises, such as the Great Eastern Japan earthquake in 2011 and the Japan floods of 2018. And we are also providing scholarships to hundreds of students, along with unique learning experience to thousands of young people, and so much more. Leadership is a quality not determined by title, age, or popularity. It reflects character traits that set the few apart from the crowd. Our communities have both benefited from men and women who possess that quality and helped our community endure adversity and find inspiration in even the darkest of times. That is why, from the very beginning of the US-Japan Council, its leadership recognized the importance of investing in developing the next generation of leaders. Since year one of its operations, the US-Japan Council has administered the Emerging Leaders Program, which recognizes the young members of our community who possess the traits of leadership. The program offers participants the opportunity to cultivate their skills so they can have the confidence to broaden the scope of their leadership beyond their zones of comfort. Emerging leaders participate in leadership education, but more importantly, they have the opportunity to network with other men and women from across the country who all share a common heritage. In doing so, they establish powerful professional connections and lifelong personal relationships. Each year, a new cohort is recruited from ages 24 to 35 who have already demonstrated their leadership contributions to society. They're invited to attend the annual conference. They then become USJC associates and join program alumni in bridging the future of the US-Japan relationship. The young leaders chosen are unified in their passion and commitment to build community and strengthen relationships, both domestically and across the Pacific. Their diversity of talent and unity of purpose is a great strength and a source of inspiration and energy. I am proud to support the Emerging Leaders Program through my own role as an advisor, sponsor, and participant in ELP activities. I would also like to acknowledge and thank Ito-En and its CEO, Mr. Yosuke Honjo, for being the founding sponsor of the program, and who, along with other key program sponsors, annually underwrite its continuation. This year, we welcome our 11th cohort with 12 members who come from across the US and also a young leader from Japan. While they cannot join an in-person annual conference this year, we know they and many of the program alumni are tuning in right now, and we have great experiential opportunities planned for them in the year ahead. And with that, It is my pleasure to introduce to you three of these incredible alumni: Danielle Higa from the class of 2017, Steve Sakanashi from the class of 2015, and Kira Teshima from the class of 2014. At the past few annual conferences, the ELP alumni panel has been an inspirational high point for all in attendance. Closing out this U.S.-Japan Council's public symposium, we look to these young leaders for a message of hope and call to action around continuing the legacy of USJC's founders and their vision of creating connected communities, which we all know is critically important in the world we find ourselves in today. I will now hand it off to them to share their stories of family legacies, personal growth, and investing in the next generation of leaders. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Danielle Higa, ELP class of 2017. We are excited to share our personal stories about building strong and resilient community. First up is Kira Teshima.
Good evening. As Danielle said, my name is Kira Teshima, and I'm a 2014 ELP alum residing in Los Angeles. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, and for the past 8 years, I've been practicing real estate and land use law at Shepherd Mullen in downtown LA. My mother, Rosalinda, is Filipino-American, and my father, Ken, is Japanese-American. Having grown up in a melting pot like Honolulu, my multi-ethnic background was not unique. My family potlucks, we'd have lumpia and pancit mixed in with spam musubi, and my favorite, of course, butter mochi. As a kid, every year, when our lychee tree was full of fruit, we would divvy them up and put them in little brown paper bags and deliver them to people in our community. The mailman, the dentist, the bank teller, hairdresser, and so forth. And those of you from Hawaii know, we routinely refer to people in our community as auntie or uncle, cousin, even if we aren't related. I was so lucky to grow up in a culturally rich and close-knit community, and that aloha spirit has stayed with me. When I moved to California, I quickly realized that I needed to find my chosen ohana or family away from home. I found my ohana in Little Tokyo here in LA. Over the past 10 years, I've met incredible leaders who welcomed me into the Little Tokyo community. Having worked with several organizations, I've learned that each group serves a unique need. But at the end of the day, I believe there is a common goal, and that goal is to enrich the lives of others and leave this world a better place for the next generation. It's a simple mission, but it's given me purpose and allowed me to put down roots and truly make Los Angeles my home. My first introduction to community was through the Japanese American National Museum. I was introduced to a woman that many of you may know, Miss Dana Heatherton, also an ELP alum, who at the time was leading the museum's Young Professionals Network, hosting philanthropic and social activities, connecting young people to foster the next generation of leaders and support the Japanese American community. I was immediately inspired by her and so many of the young leaders that I met. I eventually served as the chair of the Young Professionals Network. And some of you who attend the museum's annual gala may remember me because I emceed the live bid for education for a couple of years with Dr. Mitch Mackey, who is now the CEO and president of the Go for Broke National Education Center. I'm so grateful for that early experience because it really was a launch pad for me to connect with so many of you very early on in my career. 5 years ago, I was elected to the Board of Governors of the Japanese American Bar Association. And in 2021, I will be JABA's president. JABA was founded over 40 years ago by pioneering JA lawyers in Los Angeles, including trailblazers like Chiyoko Sakamoto, the first Japanese American female lawyer in California. To think that 4 decades later, a young, female, multi-ethnic JA like myself will lead JABA is a true testament to the important legacy of my predecessors. It is important to me to pay it forward and mentor other up-and-coming lawyers and law students of diverse backgrounds. I also believe it's my professional duty to use my skills to create change and improve the lives of others, people that are less fortunate than me. It was recently said best by one of my mentors and Java trailblazer, Mia Yamamoto. She said, "What we do for money will support us. What we do for free will define us." When I was selected as part of the 2014 Emerging Leaders Program cohort, I met many of my peers across the country and Japan who share my passion for community building, each with their own unique stories and incredible careers. I left that annual conference in Honolulu energized and committed more than ever to build abundance in my community. At the 2017 USJC U40 Summit in Los Angeles, the late Dean Matsubayashi, the executive director of the Little Tokyo Service Center, presented to our cohort. As some of you may know, LTSC provides an array of social welfare and community development services to assist low-income individuals and other persons in need. During Dean's presentation, I learned that LTSC also develops affordable housing projects throughout Los Angeles and is particularly committed to the preservation of the Little Tokyo neighborhood. This is an important turning point in my story. Meeting Dean was the first time that my professional skills as a land use attorney suddenly aligned with my personal passion for community. Since 2018, I've had the absolute pleasure to serve on the LTSC Board of Directors and contribute to the organization's important community development work. I'm lead counsel on the development of the Go for Broke apartments project in Little Tokyo, which will provide over 70 units of affordable housing and permanent office and meeting space for the Go for Broke National Education Center. In the midst of a global pandemic and social awakening, it truly feels like we are in a moment that my generation is embracing and leading in our respective fields. Like many of my ELP brothers and sisters, I've spent the last decade with my foot on the gas and endeavoring to build my career and feed my soul by giving back to community. And suddenly I've arrived. I have a seat at the table and my moment is now. And today I have more reason than ever to lead. And that reason is my 1-year-old daughter, Ama. She spent most of her first year of life sequestered from family and friends due to COVID. But when I think about the full life ahead of her, I get emotional imagining her finally meeting my chosen ohana, the aunties, uncles, and cousins who warmly welcomed me to this new city. Those special people who invested in me and continue to lift me up along the way. Thank you to our USJC community leaders, mentors, sponsors who have empowered my generation to lead. Tonight, I'm asking for your continued support and investment in the Emerging Leaders Program as a critical part of building strong and resilient community. And lastly, to my ELP family, the future is so bright with us leading the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Kira. Well, you know, although I actually live in Japan, I'm originally from LA. And so I'm familiar with a lot of the organizations that you mentioned. And really, they are the backbone of the local Japanese American community. And it's people like you who are there making sure that this important work and legacy is going to continue for generations to come. So for me, as a LA boy who's far from home, I just want to say thank you for taking care of my community. You know, one of the things you said really got me thinking. You said, what we do for money supports us, but what we do for free defines us. And you mentioned your daughter, and for me, it's very similar. I can't help but think about my own children and how I want to make Japan a better place, not just for them, but also for all of their friends. So it really challenges me to step back and see the bigger picture, you know, beyond money and career, and remember that first and foremost, I, like everyone, have a responsibility of passing on something greater than what was given to me. So thank you for that reminder. And now, as someone who spent many years in Seattle, I'm very proud to introduce my fellow ELP alum and Seattle native, Danielle Higa. Danielle.
Thanks, Steve. Hello again, I'm Danielle Higa. I'm a lifelong Seattleite and fourth-generation Japanese American Yonsei. Growing up, I've learned about the power of community, volunteerism, and putting others before yourself. My earliest influencers came way before social media. Those are my family, my great-grandparents who came from Japan and Okinawa, and my grandparents, their American-born children. These are the generations who had to start over multiple times during their lives, and every day I'm thankful for what they have given me. My grandparents all had different stories. My paternal grandma, Hatsumi or Hattiga, was born and raised in Tacoma before World War II, and then she was forced to live at Minidoka and Tule Lake incarceration camps during the war. My paternal grandfather, James Kamato Higa, was born on a sugarcane plantation on the Big Island of Hawaii and grew up in Honolulu. My maternal grandparents were both from Spokane, Washington. My grandma, Hiroko Nakashima, a Kibe High School student who was in Japan during World War II, and she's currently 93 years young. Her husband, my grandfather, George Nakashima, a mechanical engineer, not the artist, fortunately was not incarcerated during the war because Spokane was outside of the exclusion zone. And if you know me, you know I can never stay away from working or volunteering in the Japanese American community. I've come back twice during my career, and maybe that's because my parents were very good at recruiting my siblings and I to always help out. We logged many hours of pouring tea for elders, selling baked goods, helping with data entry, and running chow mein dinners out to cars for takeout. I've been involved with the Nisei Veterans Committee, or NVC, since childhood, where I'm currently serving my term as first vice president of the foundation. And growing up, I wanted to learn more about what my family and others in the community experienced, and got to hear many World War II era stories at NVC Hall before many Nisei passed away. Hearing these stories, I could always see and feel painful effects of the trauma and racism that harmed our community and my relatives. My grandma Hatz emphasized education constantly, and it was because she went to high school and camp, then had to work to help send her brothers to college after the war ended. So she was deprived of quality education, but she always encouraged her children and grandchildren to go to college. As I grow older, I find myself holding on to these lessons even more because, looking back, I didn't fully understand their sacrifices and hardship as a kid. The first quarter of my freshman year at the University of Washington, I was in Asian American Studies 101 and was tasked to conduct an oral history and write a paper on the subject of my choice. So I chose to interview Grandma Hatz. Grandma never spoke about her experience, but when I said I'd get a bad grade if she didn't participate, she quickly changed her mind. It was that very class I used the earliest Densho website, and I've been following the organization ever since. After a few years of working at the UW in alumni relations and fundraising, I knew I'd come back to the community, and right before I joined ELP, I came to Densho, where I'm the fund development manager. I serve as a core part of the organization's development and community outreach endeavors, so I get to interact with many friends and supporters all around the country. Our mission is to preserve and share the history of the World War II incarceration of Japanese Americans to promote equity and justice today. We are a grassroots community archive with a national and global audience that uses technology to provide oral history interviews from Japanese American survivors of the incarceration, along with family collections. Our family collections contain over 100,000 items of historical photographs and documents spanning immigration from Japan to post-World War II and redress. Densho means to pass on to the next generation or to leave a legacy. And if you're familiar with our logo, it looks like a ripple effect in water, demonstrating the impact our past has on the future. So my job is not just a job, it's also a very healing experience from the trauma and the past, because we keep history alive for future generations to come. What I love about Densho is that it isn't a traditional archive, library, or museum, because we connect what we learn from the Japanese American incarceration to prevent similar injustices for any group facing discrimination based on ancestry, race, faith, or immigration status. We make our content relevant through other avenues, such as our new podcast called Kompu, available wherever you get your podcasts. We've created curricula that connects Black and Japanese American history and have brought together Indigenous and Japanese American artists to foster dialogue around healing intergenerational trauma. We also continue to partner with other communities and organizations such as the Council on American Islamic Relations and TED-Ed, who are outside of the Japanese American community, but essential in building solidarity and growing our educational programming. If you follow us at Dentro Project on social media, you'll see more of how we revive and bring history into the modern world. Through my time at Dentro, I've heard from many people that the older you get, you want to be even more connected to your roots. And this is definitely true, and the reason why I also love being a part of USJC and ELP. I've never felt more connected to my Japanese heritage and have never met more individuals who share these same bonds of identity. When I think about building a resilient community for the future, I always ask myself the question, what kind of ancestor do I want to be? I want to be the kind of ancestor that can get back up when knocked down, serves her community and is good to others, and act as a storyteller grounded by the past to create opportunities to empower future generations. This question helps guide me with everything I do, especially as I continue to grow as a leader with my fellow ELP brothers and sisters. I'm inspired by the people of my past, but there are so many influencers of the present in the ELP and USJC family. And each person I've met through USJC has brought something remarkable into my life, and I continuously try to pay it forward. ELP is an indispensable support system and a place of belonging, allowing that bridge between our personal and professional life, which is a rare package. In the Seattle Japanese American community and in other cities, I'm seeing my generation already leading the way. Our time is now, and we've been given many opportunities and tools to grow into great leaders. I see many ELP alumni and friends who are already cultivating and mentoring the next generation, but this still requires the rest of the community support. So I'm calling upon all of you, our USJC members and community leaders, to continue to nurture this program because we can't do this without you. The USJC and ELP community have really enriched my life because of the lifelong relationships with amazing people who constantly motivate me to question what kind of ancestor I'd like to be for my community and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. I love the educational perspective that your work brings to this topic of building resilient community. Not only are you bridging generations within the JA community, but you're serving this valuable function in connecting the JA story to other disenfranchised communities of color. It's just amazing. I really appreciate your thought-provoking question of what kind of ancestor do I want to be? Your response really resonated with me. I do want to be good to others, of course, and it reminded me of my mother, who always says that her dad was known as the kindest man, and she always says that. And he was a tailor in Chinatown in Oahu, Danielle, and like my grandpa, I'd like to be the kind of ancestor who puts others before me and serves my community with kindness. So thank you for that very thoughtful question. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and fellow ELP alum, Steve Sakanashi.
皆さん、おはようございます。Well, good morning, everybody from beautiful Tokyo. As Kira said, my name is Steve Sakanashi, and I'm a 2015 ELP, permanently living in Japan. 2014, I moved to Japan with my wife, Joy, and our 9-month-old son, Isamu. During the past 6 years, we've grown into a household of 6, with the addition of my son, Shotaro, my daughter, Emma, and even my own mother, Aki, their bachan, who returned to Japan after spending about 40 years living in America. So people often ask me, why did you move to Japan? And the short answer is work, but the long answer, which I hope to share with you today, is that I wanted to come back home. See, I was born and raised in Los Angeles as a dual citizen of Japan, but I never learned how to speak Japanese, visited Japan, or really knew my Japanese family as a child. And after multiple failed attempts to try and bridge this gap, I finally decided to bury this half of me so that I could escape from the pain of loss and the shame of carrying a hollow identity as a paper citizen of Japan. But all of this changed for me when I was 18, and I had to face the unexpected death of my dad. I began to wonder about my identity and my purpose in life. I began to wonder again about Japan. 1 year after my dad died, I visited Japan for the first time and fell in love with the country, my country. And I decided that I wanted to use my life to benefit Japan. I felt a strong calling to come back to Japan and do whatever I could to create a better future. Although my dad and I never discussed it while he was alive, I later learned that my dad and I shared the same heart for Japan. Through his journals, which he gave to me shortly before passing away, I discovered my father's deep love for Japan and his desire as a Japanese American to do something unique for the country. I read about how he pursued a business venture focused on Japan, failed when the bubble burst, and as a result, carried the burden and shame of personal bankruptcy for years. I read about how after this failure, he kept it secret, but dreamed of one day creating a Japanese VC fund, which is actually something I've also begun to dream about on my own. And I realized while embarking on my own entrepreneurial journey in Japan that I am not a lone runner. I am his son, and I get to continue his race. Last year, I was actually interviewed by the Japan Times, and they asked me a rather unusual question. They said, if you had a ship, what would you name it? And this was my reply, quote, Mark T. Sakanashi, after my dad. He went bankrupt trying to help Japan, and I want people to know his name, end quote. I wish I could tell him face to face what I'm telling you today, that I'm proud of him for risking it all, and that he's the one that gives me the courage each day to dream bigger and risk more for the sake of a better Japan. Well, my journey to Japan was not elaborately planned. 8 years ago, when I founded Sekai Creator, a startup incubator for Japanese university students, I was actually a college pastor in Seattle. And I had definitely never run a startup program before because, in fact, I had never even started my own business. But I believed that Japan's future was in danger and that developing entrepreneurial leaders could save Japan. So after piloting the program in Seattle, I moved to Tokyo without any real ability to speak Japanese and launched Sekai Creator in Japan. And because of this, the fact that I couldn't speak Japanese, I can say that it's only through the support of community that I've been able to train hundreds of students from junior high school all the way up to university and watch them get started on their own entrepreneurial journeys. Actually, for me, when I joined USJC after moving to Japan through the ELP program, my opportunities in Japan were immediately expanded. In 2016, I was invited to support the Tomodachi Initiative's annual Silicon Valley Award trip as a mentor to Japan's top university entrepreneurs. This trip changed my life in 3 significant ways. First, I fell in love with the program and eventually became the annual trip coordinator, establishing lifelong bonds with the most promising startup founders in Japan. Second, I established a friendship with the trip coordinator, Shizuka, who was later given the responsibility of leading the APT Women's Program, which is the Tokyo Metropolitan Government's flagship startup accelerator program for women. And she kindly invited me to support the program as a lecturer and mentor, helping prepare Japanese founders to pitch their ventures overseas. Third, I became best friends with my Japanese co-mentor on that trip, Hiro, who spent the majority of elementary years in the US. Well, after the trip, he continued building his company, transitioning from the largest mega franchise of Lawson convenience stores into a national pioneer in HR tech. And after years of dinners and dreaming together, last year I officially joined Matchbox Technologies as a director of marketing and global strategy. Well, in addition to these professional opportunities, USJC has also invited me to be a part of generational initiatives in Japan. Recently, our USJC Japan region members have launched the Japanese American Storytellers Program, an initiative to send Japanese American council members into university classrooms, sharing personal family accounts of Japanese history. This month, I'm very excited because I get to visit my first class at the University of Tokyo and share about my family's 99-year journey from Japan to America and back again to Japan. And most importantly, when it comes to community in Japan, I'm very proud to say that I am a member of the tiny yet mighty cohort of Tokyo ELPs. We're passionate about investing in the next generation of Tomodachi alumni while also strengthening the domestic leadership network among our Japanese peers, beginning with the Mitsui Leadership Program, which I like to affectionately call the Japanese version of ELP. And now that I've been living in Japan for 6 years, people ask me a different question. How long will you stay in Japan? And my answer is indefinitely, because Japan has become our home. It's where my kids have all grown up and where, by choice, we will raise them until they leave. The future of Japan matters to me because Very simply, it is a future of my own kids. I want my kids to grow up in a place where they won't be ashamed of their lighter skin and their freckles, a beautiful gift from their mother. I want them to have the freedom to dream and create new things and not be chained down by the rigidity of a system or the social expectations of others. I want this and so many more things for them, and I want them to be able to get it without leaving Japan. In truth, that future feels farther away than I would like to admit. As in all places, there's no shortage of challenges here in Japan. But when I think about my Japanese peers, my Tomodachi alumni, and my own children and their friends, I'm confident that we can create and will create a better Japan. As I reflect on what my dad passed down to me, and I also hope to leave for my own kids, I can't help but think about generational sustainability and the paramount role that inheritance can play. I learned from losing my dad at a young age that heroes can't stay forever. And when they're gone, whether or not you're ready, you must take the baton and continue the race. Otherwise, their vision dies and their legacy ends. I was not ready for this when that reality came to me, but I had to find a way forward. I felt the same thing this year, actually, as a son of USJC, when our ELP family lost our beloved mother, Irene. We were not ready. But recently, this has caused me to really fixate on a question. The question is, when the burden of leadership passes to me, will I be ready? And how will I become ready? I don't want to approach this challenge proudly on my own, but rather as an heir to an incredible family inheritance. I realize that I need to seek out my senpai, the senior leaders in the USJC, particularly those living in Japan, and ask them to teach me everything that they know and tell me everything that they experienced while becoming a leader in Japan. I need this guidance so that I can become a leader who is worthy to inherit their legacy and to continue the important race that they began. Already, we ELP have received so much support, but I want to be bold and ask for even more. For the sake of the future resiliency of our whole community, would you 10x your investment into us relationally so that we can succeed as leaders now and ensure that we will pass on a greater inheritance to the next generation of US-Japan leaders coming up through Tomodachi and beyond? And with this challenge, I'm asking, put the pressure on us to continue your legacy of ensuring the relationship between America and Japan. I promise that we will do whatever it takes, and we will not let you down. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, Steve, and Kira, for sharing your personal reflections and powerful call to action for support and continued investment in the rising leaders in our membership ranks and in the broader Japanese American community. The goal of this symposium has been to facilitate dialogue around critical US, Japan, and Japanese American community issues and educate and engage key stakeholders and the general public on these issues. In doing so, we hope we have enhanced the public knowledge around these issues and helped shape an agenda for a stronger binational relationship and engage communities from both countries. Our topics have directly tied to USJC's mission to develop and connect diverse leaders to create a stronger US-Japan relationship. Before we close out, I want to once again thank our many sponsors and promotional partners for support of this symposium. First, I would like to offer sincere appreciation for our platinum sponsors at FABIT and the Ford Foundation. We also thank our title sponsors, Central Pacific Bank, Hitachi, Ito-En, Mitsui, MUFG, the Terasaki Nibei Foundation, and the Toyota Research Institute. I also want to thank our signature sponsors, and you can see them listed here on the slide. We're so grateful for their support in making programming like this possible, not just for the public symposium, but throughout the year. And to the many companies and individuals who make up our premier sponsors, we truly appreciate their generosity. I really are proud of this fantastic and diverse group of supporters, and we couldn't be here without them. Finally, we want to share our gold sponsors shown on this slide. And we thank each and every one of the companies and individuals and families that are listed on this. I also want to give a special thanks to the numerous promotional partners who helped spread the word about this week's various topical sessions in their own networks. And I think that really showed that we are indeed stronger together, and we look forward to supporting all of our partners in the future. And thanks to each and every one of you who've joined our sessions this week. USJC strives to develop and strengthen people-to-people relations. If you're new to USJC, we hope that you'll join our community and help us achieve our mission. And with that, we hope that some of you will consider making a tax-deductible donation to USJC to help us continue to deliver unique content and experiences. As shown in the slide here, and information's on our website, of course, as well, about how to donate. Thanks to everybody who already has supported us and those of you who made a donation when you registered. Lastly, I want to let everyone know about our upcoming, which is the last in our signature series for 2020, and it's called the 3 R's of 2020, Reflective, Resilient, and Revolutionary. And this is our Next Generation Summit. So it'll be for the under 40 and Tomodachi alumni to give their voices to the discussion about what's going on in this year of change and the power of resilience. A great set of topics, great set of speakers. So please check out the details on our website. And if you're interested in finding out what the future holds, join us. Once again, thank you all for joining us this week. And if we don't see you in December at our summit, we look forward to seeing you next year.